The notification lit up my phone just as I was about to head to bed. A message from my sister, Elena. "You need to see this, Maria. I wasn't sure whether to send it, but you deserve to know." Attached was a 30-second video. I hesitated, a strange tightness forming in my chest as I tapped play. The screen flickered, revealing my daughter, Sophia, sitting in my sister's living room. She had a glass of wine in hand, legs crossed casually, her expression amused. Across from her sat Elena's daughter, my niece, Carla. "Ugh, my mom is such a joke," Sophia sighed, rolling her eyes. "Come on, she's done a lot for you," Carla said, her voice hesitant. Sophia snorted. "Please, she's never accomplished anything in life. Just some pathetic loser who works like a dog for nothing. It's embarrassing. It's why I don't even invite people over. I mean, can you imagine? Oh yeah, my mom works at a diner and cleans houses on the side. So tragic." I felt my stomach drop. Pathetic loser, embarrassing, never accomplished anything. I gripped the phone so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Elena's voice came from behind the camera. "Sophia, that's your mother. Do you even hear yourself?" Sophia laughed. "What? She acts like some self-sacrificing hero just because she worked 2 jobs. Newsflash. Parents are supposed to take care of their kids. I didn't ask for any of it. She just loves playing the martyr." The video ended, but the sound of my daughter's voice echoed in my mind. I stared at the screen, the weight of her words pressing against my chest like a cinder block. This was my daughter, the child I had sacrificed everything for. 2 jobs, 15-hour days, countless nights where I came home too exhausted to even eat, just so she could have everything I never had. All for what? So she could sit in a cushy living room, sipping wine and mocking me? I read Elena's next message. "I confronted her after this. She doesn't even feel bad, Maria. She really believes it. I didn't know if I should tell you, but I couldn't keep quiet." I swallowed hard, blinking back the burn of tears. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I set my phone down and walked to the bathroom, gripping the edge of the sink to steady myself. This wasn't just about the video. It was about everything. Sophia had always been difficult, entitled, ungrateful, dismissive. She had grown up in a warm home, wearing new clothes, going on school trips, and never worrying about money. Because I made sure of it. I took every extra shift, every side gig, just to make sure she never felt the struggles I did as a child. And yet, she looked at me with nothing but disdain. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. I could have screamed. I could have confronted her that night. I could have called her out for every cruel word. But no, that would be too easy. She needed to learn a lesson she would never forget. I stayed quiet. I acted normal, because by next week, she would receive the ultimate surprise. I woke up early the next morning, the weight of the video still pressing against my chest. The words "pathetic loser" and "never accomplished anything" ran on a loop in my mind, but I refused to let anger consume me. No, anger wasn't enough. I needed something more. Something that would make Sophia realize, once and for all, the reality of her own life. I glanced over at the clock, 6:15 a.m. She was still asleep. Typical. 27 years old and still living under my roof, waking up at noon, refusing to work a real job. I had made it too easy for her. That was about to change. By the time she dragged herself out of bed at noon, I was already cleaning up from breakfast. She sauntered into the kitchen in her oversized sweater and pajama shorts, yawning. "Morning," she mumbled, heading straight for the fridge. "Afternoon," I corrected, placing my coffee cup in the sink. She pulled out the oat milk I bought for her last week and poured it into the organic cereal she insisted on eating. I watched as she moved around the kitchen, completely unaware that everything in her life was about to shift. "I need your card later," she said casually, leaning against the counter as she scrolled through her phone. "My card?" I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, there's a sale at that boutique I like. I saw this leather jacket." "No," she blinked, finally looking up. No? That's right, I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. I'm not paying for anything else for you, Sophia. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever again. Her lips parted slightly in disbelief. Wait, what? You're joking, right? Do I look like I'm joking? She laughed. Okay, seriously, what's wrong with you? Did something happen at work? Work. That word hit me harder than she realized. You know what, Sophia? That's an interesting question. Did something happen at work? I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. Let's see. I spent the last 20 years breaking my back to keep this roof over our heads. I worked 2 jobs, gave you everything, and in return, I got a daughter who thinks I'm a pathetic loser. Her face paled slightly. What? Elena sent me the video, I said flatly. I heard everything. Her fingers tightened around her phone, her expression shifting between guilt and irritation. Mom, you're taking that way too seriously. I was just venting. Venting. I let the word hang in the air. So, calling me a failure, saying I'm embarrassing, telling Carla that you don't even want people to know I'm your mother. That was just harmless venting. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Look, I didn't mean it like that. I was just frustrated. Frustrated? With what? I scoffed. With living rent-free? With having food on the table? With never having to worry about a single bill? She rolled her eyes. Oh my God, here we go. You always do this. You act like you're some saint because you worked hard. Newsflash, Mom. Parents are supposed to provide for their kids. You're not special. That was it. That was the moment I felt something inside me snap into place. Not with anger, but with certainty. You're right, I said, my voice calm. Parents are supposed to provide for their children. And I did. But guess what, Sophia? You're not a child anymore. I walked over to the kitchen drawer, pulled out a single envelope, and placed it on the table between us. What's this? She asked, staring at it. Open it. She hesitated, then picked it up, ripping it open with a sigh. As her eyes scanned the papers inside, her face twisted in confusion. A job application? An apartment listing? She looked up at me, bewildered. Congratulations, I said, smiling. You're officially on your own. The moment hung between us, thick with disbelief. No, she said, shaking her head. No, you're not serious. I'm very serious. I folded my arms. You have 30 days to find a job and a new place to live. You're an adult, Sophia. It's time to start acting like one. Her eyes widened. Mom, you can't do this. I don't have any money. Not my problem. This is insane. She slammed the paper down. What, you're just kicking me out? Over some stupid video? No, Sophia. I'm kicking you out because I refuse to keep supporting someone who thinks I'm worthless. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. For the first time in her life, she looked truly scared. But where am I supposed to go? You're 27, I said simply. Figure it out. Her bottom lip trembled slightly, but then she clenched her jaw. Fine. I don't need you anyway. I'll go live with Dad. I laughed. A deep, genuine, bitter laugh that made her flinch. Oh, Sophia, I said, shaking my head. That's the funniest thing you've ever said. Because her father, the man who had walked out on us when she was 5, the man who hadn't sent a single child support check, a single birthday card, a single, how is she doing, in 22 years. He wasn't coming to save her. Good luck with that, I said, turning my back to her. Mom! Her voice was smaller now, softer. I paused. Can we just talk about this? I exhaled slowly, then turned to face her again. Her arrogance was gone. Her smugness, her dismissive tone, all of it had crumbled. We'll talk, I said finally. After you figure out where you're going to live. Then I walked away, leaving her standing there, staring at the first real problem in her life that I wasn't going to fix for her. Sophia sat on the couch, unmoving, staring blankly at the apartment listing I had given her. The confidence she had just minutes ago, the defiance, the entitlement, was crumbling right before my eyes. I didn't say another word. I simply walked into my bedroom, shut the door, and let her sit with the weight of reality. For the first time in her life, there was no safety net. She was on her own. The next few days were eerily quiet. Sophia barely spoke to me. She still ate my food, slept in my house, used my Wi-Fi. But there was a shift, a tension. The first morning after our conversation, I woke up early as usual and made coffee. When I walked into the living room, I saw her on her laptop, scrolling through job postings. It was the first time I had ever seen her actively look for work. "Did you sleep?" I asked. She rubbed her face. "Not really." "That's what stress does to you," I said, sipping my coffee. "Welcome to adulthood." She let out a humorless laugh, but didn't say anything else. Good. Let her sit with it. I had carried her weight for far too long. Now she would finally feel what it was like to stand on her own feet. By the 5th day, Sophia was desperate. She had gone out that morning, saying she had an interview at some retail store, but when she came back, she looked defeated. "How did it go?" I asked, setting my book down. She threw her bag onto the chair. "They didn't hire me." "Why not?" she groaned. "I don't know. They said something about me not having experience, but it's a freaking cashier job. How much experience do you need to scan a barcode?" I shrugged. "I guess now you understand why people work hard for their jobs. The world doesn't hand things to you, Sophia." She didn't respond. She just flopped onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. "Did you check out the apartments I gave you?" I asked. She scoffed. "Yeah. You expect me to afford a place that costs $1,500 a month on minimum wage? Even if I get a job, it won't be enough." I crossed my arms. "Maybe now you understand why I worked 2 jobs for years." She didn't say anything, because she finally understood. By the 10th day, she started breaking down. She had applied to multiple jobs. Nothing. She had checked the apartment listings. Everything was too expensive. And then came the final straw. That morning, she reached into the fridge and grabbed a yogurt. The expensive kind she always demanded. She peeled the lid back, took a bite, and then I held out my hand. "That'll be $3, I said. She frowned. "What?" $3, I repeated. "That's how much it cost. If you're staying here, you're paying for your own food." She stared at me like I had lost my mind. "You're charging me for yogurt?" "Yes." "Mom, seriously?" "Sophia," I said calmly, "you're an adult. You're looking for a job. You need to understand how money works. That starts today." Her jaw clenched. "This is insane." "No, Sophia. What's insane is me paying for everything while you sit here calling me a failure. What's insane is you being 27 years old and expecting me to take care of you like you're a child." Her face turned red, but she had no argument, because she knew I was right. For years, she had mocked my hard work, acting like she was better than me while I provided for her. Now she knew what it felt like to struggle. She slammed the yogurt onto the counter and stormed into her room. On the 15th day, she finally cracked. I was folding laundry when I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, she stood there, her eyes red, her lips pressed together. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, in a small voice, she asked, "Can we talk?" I gestured for her to come in, sitting on the bed while she sat in the chair across from me. "I get it now," she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. I thought I was better than you," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Because I went to college. Because I had friends who lived differently. But I didn't see everything you did. I didn't see how hard it was for you." I swallowed, my hands tightening in my lap. "And then, I couldn't even get a basic job," she continued, wiping her nose. "Nobody wanted to hire me. I didn't know how expensive everything was. I didn't know how exhausting it is to worry about money every day. And the worst part is," her voice broke, "you did it alone, and I acted like you were nothing. I'm so sorry, Mom." Her shoulders shook, and for the first time in years, I saw my daughter. Not the spoiled, entitled version of her, but the lost, humbled young woman she had never been forced to be. I took a deep breath, then said, "Do you know why your father left?" She sniffled, looking up. He just didn't love us, right? I shook my head. No, Sophia. He left because he was a coward. He didn't want responsibility. He didn't want to work hard. He thought life should be easy, that people owed him things. Just like you did. Her lip trembled. I never wanted that for you, I continued. I worked myself to the bone so you wouldn't have to struggle. But in doing that, I made a mistake. I protected you too much from reality. Her head lowered. She understood. For the first time in her life, she truly understood. Mom, can I start over? She asked quietly. I studied her face. For once, there was no arrogance, no entitlement, just genuine regret. I exhaled, nodding. That depends. Are you ready to change? She nodded quickly. Yes, I swear, yes. I reached for her hand, squeezing it. Then let's start over. Because real revenge is making someone change from the inside out. The morning after our conversation, something was different. For the first time in years, Sophia was up before noon. I heard the creak of her bedroom door at 7 a.m., a time she usually never acknowledged unless she had an early brunch with friends. I stayed quiet as she walked into the kitchen. She didn't immediately reach for her usual oat milk and organic cereal. Instead, she hesitated, then grabbed a loaf of bread and started making toast. A cheap, simple breakfast. A meal she never would have chosen before she realized how expensive food was. Progress. Good morning, I said, sipping my coffee. Morning, she mumbled, sliding into a chair. She didn't have her phone in her hand. She wasn't scrolling through social media, texting friends, or watching influencers flaunt their extravagant lives. She was just sitting there, present, real. I let the silence settle before asking, "What's the plan today?" She exhaled. I have an interview." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh," she nodded, poking at her toast. "It's at the cafe down the street. It's just a waitress job, but—" She trailed off. "But it's a start," I finished for her. She nodded. I smiled slightly, watching her. Good. Let me know how it goes. 3 days later, she got the job. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't high-paying. But it was hers. I knew because I watched her drag herself through the front door at the end of her first shift. "Oh my God!" she groaned, collapsing onto the couch, kicking off her shoes. I smirked. "Rough day?" She shot me a look. "My feet feel like they've been stomped on by a herd of elephants. And customers? They're the worst. Some guy snapped his fingers at me like I was a dog. A woman sent back her coffee 3 times. A kid spilled juice all over my jeans. And the tips? Barely anything." "Ah," I said, sipping my tea. "So working hard for little appreciation is frustrating?" Her lips pressed together. "Now imagine doing that for 20 years, I added. Her face softened. "Mom." "I'm proud of you, Sophia," I said, setting my mug down. "Really, this is the first real thing you've done for yourself. And the first time you've understood what my life has been like." She sat up, rubbing her sore feet. "I used to think you were just, obsessed with work, that you didn't have a life outside of it. But I get it now. You didn't have a choice." I nodded. "No, I didn't. And neither do you, if you want a real life." She exhaled, leaning back against the couch. For once, she didn't argue. A week later, her wake-up call hit even harder. She was hunched over the kitchen table, staring at the apartment listings I had given her weeks ago. But this time, she was holding a pen and calculator, actually doing the math. "I don't think I can afford any of these," she admitted, looking up at me. "Even with this job, I'd barely cover rent, and I'd have nothing left for food or bills." "That's reality, Sophia," I said. "That's why people work 2 jobs, have roommates, and sacrifice luxuries. You can't have everything handed to you and expect to live comfortably." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't want to live like this forever." "Then do something about it," I said simply. She looked at me, eyebrows drawn. Like what? I leaned against the counter. You have a degree, Sophia, a good one, but you've been sitting around, waiting for the perfect job to fall into your lap. It doesn't work that way. You need to work your way up, just like everyone else. She bit her lip, staring at the table. I guess I was just scared. Of what? She swallowed. Failing. I didn't want to start at the bottom. I thought I don't know, too good for it. There it was. The entitlement she had carried for years, finally being admitted out loud. I walked over and placed a hand on hers. You're not too good to work, Sophia. No one is. You can either keep struggling or start building a real life. Your choice. She nodded. This time, she actually meant it. 2 days later, she came to me with a new plan. I applied for a job in marketing, she said. It's not my dream job, but it's an entry-level position. If I get it, I can start saving for my own place. I smiled. Finally. That's a great start, I said. I'm proud of you, Sophia. She exhaled, nodding. And I want to start paying rent. Even if it's just a little, I don't want to just live off you anymore. I blinked. That was unexpected. For the first time in years, I saw it. The real Sophia. Not the spoiled, ungrateful girl who once sneered at my hard work. Not the entitled child who thought the world owed her something, but a woman who was finally growing up. Okay, I said softly. Let's start small. You can contribute, and we'll see how things go. She nodded quickly, as if sealing a new chapter in her life. Mom? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on me. I squeezed her hand. I almost did, I admitted. But I wanted you to wake up first. She swallowed, understanding exactly what I meant. And for the first time since she was a child, she hugged me first. 3 weeks after Sophia started working at the cafe, everything was different. She woke up early. She paid for her own groceries. She cooked her own meals instead of ordering takeout with my credit card. She even started setting aside money for rent. Not because I demanded it, but because she wanted to. She was changing. And for the first time in years, I felt hope. On a quiet Sunday evening, I was setting the table when Sophia walked into the kitchen with 2 plates in her hands. I made dinner, she said, almost shyly. I glanced at the food, simple roasted chicken and vegetables. Nothing fancy, but she had never cooked a full meal before. You cooked? I asked, raising an eyebrow. She let out a small laugh. Yeah, I figured. I've been eating your food for free for 27 years. It's about time I made something for you. I smiled, setting down the utensils. Well, let's see if you inherited my cooking skills. We sat down together, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't tense. No arguing, no resentment, no entitlement, just a mother and daughter sharing a meal. Halfway through dinner, Sophia cleared her throat. So, I got some good news today, she said, her voice uncertain but excited. Oh! I set down my fork. She swallowed, playing with the hem of her shirt. I got the marketing job, the one I applied for. I blinked, stunned for a moment. Then a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. Sophia! That's incredible! She exhaled, nodding. Yeah, it's not perfect. It's entry level, and the pay isn't amazing, but it's a start. And it's something I actually want to do. I could see it. The spark of ambition that had been buried under years of entitlement. I'm proud of you, I said, meaning every word. Her lips twitched into a small smile, and then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I wanted to give you this, she said, sliding it across the table. I hesitated before picking it up. Inside was a stack of cash, several $100s. What's this? I asked, frowning slightly. She shifted in her seat. It's my first rent payment. I know it's not much, but I wanted to contribute. I don't want to take you for granted anymore, Mom. I stared at the money, my heart swelling in a way I hadn't expected. This wasn't just about rent. This was her way of apologizing. of showing gratitude, of proving she was different now. I swallowed the lump in my throat and looked at her. You don't know how much this means to me. She nodded. I think I do. I smiled, sliding the money back toward her. Keep it, I said softly. Her brows furrowed. What? But I thought, I wanted you to grow up, Sophia. I wanted you to learn responsibility, and you have. That money, use it for something that helps you move forward. Your own place, a savings account, something that makes your future better. She stared at me, eyes glistening. Are you sure? She whispered. I reached for her hand and squeezed it. Yes. You've already given me what I wanted. The daughter I always knew you could be. Later that night, as I washed the dishes, I felt something shift inside me. For so many years, I had felt like a failure as a mother. I had sacrificed so much, only to raise a daughter who once saw me as a pathetic loser. But now I saw a young woman who was finally standing on her own 2 feet. Sophia walked into the kitchen, leaning against the counter. Mom? She said quietly. I never told you why I was so angry at you before, she admitted. I turned off the faucet and looked at her. Why? She took a deep breath. I wasn't really mad at you. I was mad at myself. I always felt like I was supposed to do something great with my life, like I was supposed to be successful. But when I wasn't, it was easier to blame you than admit that I was the problem. I let that sink in before nodding. I understand. She hesitated, then continued. I don't blame you anymore. I was wrong, Mom, about everything. And I hope you can forgive me. I exhaled, drying my hands. Then, without a word, I pulled her into a hug. She didn't pull away. She held on tight. I forgave you a long time ago, I whispered. I just needed you to see yourself clearly first. A month later, Sophia found an apartment. It was small, nothing fancy, but it was hers. The day she moved out, she hugged me before she left. Thank you, Mom, she said, tears in her eyes, for everything. I love you, Sophia, I said, my voice thick with emotion. She smiled. I love you too. And as she walked out the door, not out of anger, not out of resentment, but out of choice, I realized something. The best revenge isn't hurting someone back. It's making them realize how wrong they were, and watching them change because of it.
Stepdad moved his spoiled daughter into my new house and changed the locks while I was on a business trip. When I threatened to call the cops, they laughed at me. I did it, and my mom disowned me for her new family. I was 16 when my parents sat me down in our small living room and told me they were getting divorced. No drama, no screaming matches, just 2 people who'd fallen out of love and wanted different things in life. I remember being surprisingly okay with it, maybe because they handled it so maturely or maybe because I'd seen it coming in the small ways. Fewer family dinners, parallel lives under one roof. Dad moved into a nice apartment across town, and I spent every other weekend with him. We'd order pizza and watch bad sci-fi movies just like we always had. But then Mom met Robert. Just a year after the divorce, she came home practically floating. Lucy, I've met someone special, she announced over breakfast. He's got a daughter about 10 years old. Wouldn't it be nice to have a sister? I forced a smile and pushed my cereal around the bowl. Great, Mom, really great. Within months they were married, and Robert and his daughter Sarah moved into our house. That's when the trouble started. Sarah, with her designer clothes and perfect little girl curls, looked like an angel in front of the adults. But the moment they turned away, she was a different person. It started small, my favorite sweater somehow ending up in the washing machine with red socks. My homework mysteriously getting coffee stains. Robert wasn't much better. He'd make little comments always just on the edge of rude. Lucy, don't you think that skirt's a bit short for school? He'd say, or maybe if you spent less time on the phone and more time studying, your grades would be better. I tried to tell Mom, but she'd just say, he's just protective, honey. He wants what's best for you. Then came the research project incident. I'd spent weeks working on it, interviews, data collection, everything. I came home from school early one day and found Sarah in my room, her hands stained green from the markers she'd used to destroy my work. Pages and pages of research ruined. What the hell are you doing? I shouted, grabbing her by the collar of her expensive little cardigan. Nothing, she squealed, but the evidence was all over her hands. I dragged her downstairs to where Mom and Robert were watching TV. Look at her hands, I shouted, pointing at the green stains. Look what she did to my research project. Robert jumped up, his face turning red. Get your hands off my daughter, she destroyed my work. Weeks of work. You little fool, Robert snarled, stepping toward me. How dare you manhandle my Sarah, she's just a child. I looked at Mom waiting for her to defend me, to say something, anything. But she just sat there shaking her head disapprovingly at me. Like I was the one who'd done something wrong. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Mom's silence over and over in my head. By morning I'd made my decision. I started packing before sunrise, throwing clothes and books into bags, not even caring if they were folded. Dad picked up on the first ring. Lucy, what's wrong? Can I come live with you? My voice cracked. Please? Of course, sweetheart. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Dad's truck pulled up, Robert was already at work, and Sarah was at school. Mom stood in the doorway watching me load my bags. Lucy, don't do this, she said. You're overreacting. Overreacting? I turned to face her. Your husband called me a fool and you just sat there. Your stepdaughter destroyed my work and you did nothing. Dad must have heard because his face darkened. What's this about Robert calling my daughter names? After I told him everything, he was livid. He marched straight to Robert's workplace. I stayed in the truck, but I could see them through the window of Robert's office. Dad pointing, Robert standing up, faces red, fingers jabbing. Security had to separate them before punches were thrown. Living with Dad was like breathing fresh air after being underwater. No more walking on eggshells. No more checking my room for sabotage. He helped me redo my research project, staying up late with me, bringing me coffee and snacks. Mom sent me a message a few days later. I can't believe you set your father against Robert like this. You're tearing this family apart. I didn't bother responding. What family was she talking about? The one where her husband verbally abused me? Where her stepdaughter destroyed my things? I focused instead on finishing my senior year strong. When graduation came around, Dad and Grandma sat in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. Mom was there too, with Robert and Sarah, but I barely glanced their way when I walked across the stage. We're so proud of you, sweetie, Grandma said afterward, hugging me tight. And we've got a surprise. Your father and I have been saving for your college fund. They'd saved enough to cover my tuition at the local college. I moved into the dorms that fall, ready for a fresh start. A few months into my sophomore year, Mom reached out on social media. I'm sorry about everything that happened. Can we talk? I agreed to meet her at a cafe near campus. It was awkward at first, both of us stirring our coffee too long, avoiding eye contact. Sarah's starting to look at colleges, she said. And Robert just got a new car. That's nice, I said, then quickly changed the subject. My psychology professor thinks I should consider grad school. We fell into a routine after that, monthly coffee meetings where we talked about safe topics, the weather, my classes, her work. She'd try to slip in mentions of Robert and Sarah, but I'd steer the conversation away. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. After graduation, I landed a job at Marshall & Associates as a junior project manager. Dad was thrilled and immediately offered me a place at his apartment. You could save money, Lucy, he said over dinner. No need to rush into renting. I shook my head, pushing my pasta around the plate. Thanks, Dad, but I need to do this on my own. I've found a small place near work. It's time for me to stand on my own 2 feet. The apartment I rented wasn't much, but it was mine. The first night I spent there sitting on my second-hand couch with takeout Chinese food, I felt more grown up than ever before. Every month I put aside a chunk of my paycheck into my future house fund. While my coworkers went out for expensive lunches, I brought sandwiches from home. When they hit the bars after work, I stayed late, tackling the projects nobody else wanted. Parker, the client's impossible, my colleague Jake warned when I volunteered for the Riverside account. They've gone through 3 project managers already. I just smiled. Watch me. 3 months later, the Riverside project was completed ahead of schedule. My boss called me into his office looking impressed. Lucy, I've got to say you've exceeded all expectations, he said, sliding a bonus check across his desk. Keep this up, and you're going places in this company. The quarterly bonuses started rolling in and they weren't small. Every cent went straight into my savings account. My coworkers thought I was crazy, passing up happy hours and weekend trips. You're wasting your youth, Mom said during one of our coffee meetings 2 years later. You should enjoy life a little. I am enjoying life, I replied. I'm building my future. She stirred her coffee absently. Sarah's joining a sorority at her college. Having the time of her life. I changed the subject. The weather's been nice lately. The only times I couldn't avoid Robert and Sarah were at family gatherings, Thanksgiving at Aunt Paula's, Christmas at Uncle Mike's. I'd walk in, hug Mom and pretend they didn't exist. Sarah, now in college herself, shoot me smug looks. She'd grown taller, more polished, but that mean streak was still there, just better hidden. Robert would stand with his arms crossed, looking down his nose at me. Still at that entry-level job, he'd say loud enough for others to hear, even though he knew I'd been promoted twice already. During last Thanksgiving, I was helping Aunt Paula in the kitchen when Mom cornered me by the refrigerator. Lucy, don't you think this has gone on long enough? She sighed. Sarah's grown up now. Robert's mellowed. Can't we just be a family? I closed the fridge door harder than necessary. We're not a family, Mom. We're people who happen to be connected by your marriage. That's it. You're being childish, she said, shaking her head. People grow. People change. Yeah, they do, I replied, looking her straight in the eye. I've grown enough to know I don't need toxic people in my life, even if they're technically family. She opened her mouth to argue, then just shook her head and walked away. Same old Mom, always choosing the path of least resistance, always walking away from confrontation. But every snide comment from Robert, every smug look from Sarah just reinforced that I'd made the right choice in keeping my distance. The day I turned 28, I signed the final papers on my house. After years of saving and working overtime, I'd managed to put down 60% of the total cost. The mortgage payments wouldn't keep me up at night. "Congratulations, Miss Parker," the realtor said, handing me the keys. "It's a beautiful property." Standing in my empty living room that first day, I felt like I could finally breathe. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen with granite countertops, and a backyard where I could plant a garden. All mine. I planned a housewarming party, sending invitations to family and close friends. Dad and Grandma couldn't make it. They'd recently moved to Hawaii for Dad's retirement. When I called Mom to invite her, I was specific. "I'd love for you to come, Mom, just you." She hesitated. "Lucy, that's not fair to Robert and Sarah." "Mom, it's my house. My rules." She agreed, but I should have known better. The day of the party, I opened the door to find Mom standing there with Robert and Sarah in tow. "Surprise," Mom said weakly, noting my expression. I bit my tongue and let them in. Robert's eyes scanned everything, his lips curling slightly as he took in the crown molding, the hardwood floors. "It's nice," he said, making it sound like anything but. Sarah, now 22 and dressed like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, wandered around with her nose in the air. "The kitchen's kind of small, isn't it?" I was showing my colleague Jake the back patio when I overheard Sarah talking to Mom and Robert in the living room. "Daddy, I've been looking at houses too," she said loudly enough to carry. "I'm going to get one much bigger than this, with a pool." I couldn't help myself. I walked back inside. "Really? That's interesting. What job are you planning to buy it with?" Sarah's face flushed. "I have prospects." "Prospects aren't paychecks," I said. "And last I heard you were still living off your dad's credit card." Robert's face turned that familiar shade of purple. "How dare you?" "No, how dare you?" I cut him off. "You show up uninvited to my house and then stand there insulting it?" "Lucy." Mom grabbed Robert's arm as he took a step forward. "Come on, Robert, Sarah, we're leaving." I watched them hurry out, Mom shooting me an apologetic look over her shoulder. The door closed behind them and the party continued. 3 months after the housewarming disaster, my boss called me into his office with an opportunity one couldn't refuse, leading a major project in Boston. It would mean several months away, but it could fast-track my career to senior management. My biggest concern was my house, particularly my indoor garden. I'd spent months cultivating my collection of plants, delicate orchids, temperamental peace lilies, and my pride and joy, a rare bird of paradise that had just started to bloom. Each one needed specific care, and I couldn't bear the thought of returning to dead plants. After considering my options, I swallowed my pride and drove to Mom's house. We hadn't spoken much since the housewarming incident, but I knew she had a green thumb. Thankfully, she was alone when I arrived. "Lucy," she seemed surprised to see me on her doorstep. "Is everything okay?" "I need a favor," I said, following her into the kitchen. "I'm going to Boston for a few months for work. Could you look after my house?" "Mainly the plants, they need regular watering and care." Mom's face lit up. "Of course, you know how much I love gardening." I handed her the spare keys along with detailed care instructions for each plant. The next few months were intense but rewarding. 16-hour days working with teams across multiple time zones, but the project was going well. I called Mom every week to check on things. "Everything's fine," she'd say. "Your plants are thriving. Don't worry so much, just focus on your work." I should have noticed how she always seemed to be at my house when I called, no matter what time it was. I should have picked up on the background noises, dishes clinking, TV sounds, things that shouldn't have been there if she was just stopping by to water plants. But I was too absorbed in my work to notice these red flags. Finally, after 4 months, the project wrapped up successfully. I caught a late flight home, exhausted, but proud of what I'd accomplished. The Uber dropped me off at my house just after midnight. All I could think about was a hot shower and my own bed. I inserted my key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. I tried again more carefully this time. Still nothing. The key that had worked perfectly for months suddenly didn't fit. "What the hell?" I muttered, trying again. That's when I heard it. Footsteps inside my house, moving around like they belonged there. My heart started racing as I pulled out my phone, fingers hovering over. Before I could dial, the door swung open, and there standing in my doorway, wearing pajamas like she owned the place, was Sarah. Her blonde hair was pulled up in a messy bun, and she had the audacity to look annoyed at my presence. "What are you doing here?" The words came out in a whisper, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. "What am I doing here?" Sarah's smile was smug. "Living, of course. Been here for weeks now. Daddy helped me move in while you were gone playing big shot businesswoman in Boston." I stood there, my suitcase still in hand, trying to process her words. The exhaustion from my flight disappeared, replaced by a surge of anger. "This is my house," I said through gritted teeth. "Get out now." Sarah leaned against my doorframe, and examined her manicured nails. "Yeah, that's not happening. I'm quite comfortable here. The master bathroom has amazing water pressure, by the way. Get out of my house." Each word was sharp enough to cut. Sarah's response was to laugh, and slam the door in my face. I heard the lock click, followed by her footsteps walking away. I stood there on my own front porch, surrounded by my luggage, trembling with rage. The garden lights I'd installed illuminated the flower beds I'd so carefully planned. Through the window I could see my living room, but it wasn't my living room anymore. Sarah's jacket was thrown over my couch, her shoes scattered on my hardwood floors. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and called Mom. She picked up on the third ring, sounding groggy. "Lucy? What's wrong? What's wrong?" I almost screamed. "I just got home to find Sarah living in my house. She says she's been here for weeks. Tell her to get out right now or I'm calling the police." No, don't call the police." Mom's voice went from sleepy to panicked. "We're coming over. Just wait there." "Where else am I supposed to go?" I snapped. "I'm locked out of my own house." The next 30 minutes were the longest of my life. I paced back and forth on my front porch, watching lights come on in neighboring houses. What must they think seeing me out here in the middle of the night? A few cars drove by slowly, probably wondering if they should call the police themselves. Finally, Mom's car pulled up, Robert behind the wheel. They rushed out, both still in their pajamas under their coats. "What is going on?" I demanded, confronting Mom. "Why does Sarah have keys to my house? Why are you letting her live here?" Mom at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Lucy, honey, Sarah needed a place to stay. Her lease was up and she couldn't afford the rent increase. Your house was just sitting empty." "Just sitting empty? It's my house. You had no right." "The girl needed somewhere to live," Mom said, as if that explained everything. "Your house is too big for just one person anyway, we thought." "We?" I cut her off. "There is no we when it comes to my house. You were supposed to water my plants, not move your stepdaughter in." I watched my mother's face, waiting for some sign of understanding, some acknowledgement of how completely she had betrayed my trust. Instead, she just stood there making excuses for the inexcusable. Robert stepped forward, his chest puffed out like it had been when I was 16. "Look, there was no point telling you about Sarah moving in. You would have just said no." Of course I would have said no. I was almost screaming now. "It's my house, and now I can't go in there. The locks needed changing anyway," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "They were old. I did you a favor." I stared at him in disbelief. "You do realize that's illegal, right? You can't just change the locks on someone else's property." "Legal, illegal," he scoffed. "It's done now. Sarah needs a place to stay and this house is too big for just you." "Get her out," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Get her out right now, or I'm calling the police." Robert's face twisted into that familiar smirk, the one he'd worn when I was a teenager, the one that said he knew he'd win. "You won't do that, Lucy." Mom stepped forward, wringing her hands. "If you call the police, that's it. I won't speak to you again." "Is that what you want? To destroy this family completely?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "This family? You mean the one where you let your husband illegally take over my house? That family?" Instead of responding, they turned and walked into my house, leaving me standing there with my luggage. The door closed behind them with a definitive click. My hands weren't shaking anymore as I pulled out my phone. No more hesitation, no more trying to keep the peace. "What's your emergency?" "I need to report an illegal occupancy. Someone's changed the locks on my house and moved in without my permission." 20 minutes later, 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing. The neighbors were definitely awake now, watching from behind their curtains as I explained the situation to Officers Martinez and Chen. "You're the legal owner?" Officer Martinez asked. I pulled up the property records on my phone. "Yes, I have all the documentation. I've been away on business, and I gave my mother a key to water my plants. Instead, they moved my stepsister in and changed all the locks." Officer Chen rang the doorbell. There was a long pause, shuffling sounds from inside. Finally, the door opened. Mom, Robert, and Sarah stood there, trying to look confident but failing. "Good evening," Officer Martinez said. "We need to see some identification and proof of residency from everyone." "There's been a misunderstanding," Robert said, his voice oily smooth. "Lucy gave permission for Sarah to stay here. They had a falling out, and now she's trying to cause trouble." "That's a lie," I cut in. "I never gave permission. They took advantage while I was away on business. Ask them about the locks, they'll admit they changed them without my knowledge." "The old locks were faulty," Robert started. "So you acknowledge changing the locks without the homeowner's permission?" Officer Chin interrupted, making notes. Sarah stepped forward, her earlier smugness replaced by fear. "Daddy said it would be okay. He said Lucy wouldn't mind once she got used to the idea." "Sir, changing locks on someone else's property and occupying their home without permission constitutes illegal entry," Officer Martinez said, looking directly at Robert. "We're going to have to take you and your daughter to the station." I watched in silence as the officers led them to the patrol car. Sarah looked smaller somehow, younger, like that 10-year-old girl who'd first walked into my life. Robert's face was purple with rage, but for once he kept his mouth shut. Mom stood on the porch, trembling. As the patrol car pulled away, she turned to me with such hatred in her eyes that I almost took a step back. "From this day forward," she said, her voice shaking, "you are no longer my daughter. How could you do this to your own family?" I felt strangely calm as I looked at her. This woman who had chosen everyone else over me for the past 12 years. "Mom," I said quietly, "you made it clear a long time ago that they were your real family. The day Sarah destroyed my research, and you sat there in silence. The day Robert called me names and you looked away. Every time you asked me to be the bigger person while they treated me like dirt. You chose them over and over and over again." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Without another word, she walked to her car and drove away. I spent the rest of the night sitting in my living room, surrounded by Sarah's things. Designer clothes thrown over my furniture, her photos stuck to my fridge, her toiletries cluttering my bathroom. In the morning, I called a locksmith and had every lock in the house changed. The police called later that day. They wanted to know if I would press charges. No, I said after a long pause, just make sure they understand they're not allowed on my property again. I hired a cleaning service to pack up Sarah's belongings and had them delivered to Mom's house. Then I spent a weekend cleaning every inch of my home, erasing all traces of their presence. Most of my plants had died from neglect. Even the bird of paradise was brown and withered. I threw them all out and started fresh. That was 3 months ago. Mom tried calling once but I didn't pick up. Robert sent a threatening email about suing me for Sarah's emotional distress, which I forwarded to my lawyer without responding. Sarah posted some vague social media rants about toxic people who pretend to be victims, but I blocked her accounts. Last week I ran into Aunt Paula at the grocery store. She tried to tell me that Mom was struggling with our estrangement, that I should reach out, try to make peace. Some bridges, I told her, need to stay burned. I'm sleeping better these days. My new plants are thriving in the sunlight that streams through my windows. Dad and Grandma call regularly from Hawaii, and I'm planning to visit them next month. Sometimes I catch myself reaching for the phone to call Mom, out of habit more than anything else. But then I remember that night on my porch locked out of my own home and the urge passes.